Welcome to another Tempo Storm Meta Snapshot breakdown. The latest balance changes have spiced up the Forged in the Barrens meta and have freed us from our Lunacy Mage and Secret Paladin overlords. While both decks are still relevant in the meta, they no longer boast their insane win rates or feel massively oppressive. New decks are being discovered almost daily as players become accustomed to the new core set and latest expansion. Today, we'll be taking a dive into the top decks within the meta in an effort to prepare you for ladder. Before we jump into the top tier, we'd like to welcome you to subscribe to our channel to be kept up to date with all of our Hearthstone content. And while you're at it, be sure to review our full meta report over on tempostorm.com for a more in-depth analysis of all of the top decks out there. Now let's jump right into the top tier of the meta. Tier 1 finds itself a bit short on decks this time around, with only one actually making an appearance in the top tier, Secret Paladin. While this archetype was recently nerfed and saw a pretty big hit to its namesake weapon, Sword of the Fallen, the archetype still remains at the top of the meta and continues to prove just how durable this class and this deck are. Paladin is a threat on ladder at both the higher and lower ratings, and we expect this trend to continue. Fear not though, Blizzard already said that they'd monitor the meta and, if needed, make balance changes following the upcoming Masters Tour, so if Uther proves to be an ongoing problem, the deck will be nerfed in the near future. We strongly suggest playing this deck if you're looking to climb the ladder, as it really is a versatile build. Secret Paladin has a good matchup against a lot of the decks in the meta, but it's at its best against OTK Demon Hunter. Not only can you easily pressure them with early aggression, but you can also play two powerful cards to disrupt their game plans, Cult Neophyte and Oh My Yogg. These cards alone can carry you to a win when piloted optimally. That's not to say that Paladin is unbeatable though, as the archetype definitely has its bad matchups, and its worst currently comes from Control Priest, as Anduin can pretty consistently remove all of your threats, leaving you helpless. This matchup often requires a well-timed and sticky threat, or an early Crab Rider snowballing and running away with the game. As we mentioned previously, Tier 1 only found itself with a single deck in this meta snapshot. On the other hand, Tier 2 is bursting with life, showcasing 10 different archetypes. This time, we'll be taking a look at the top 4 decks in Tier 2, but don't fret, as you can learn more about the rest of them with our full meta report over on tempostorm.com. Kicking off Tier 2 is Token Druid. This aggressive namesake druid archetype has been making waves on the ladder, taking advantage of the post-nerf meta. While many players are experimenting and trying to rediscover their rhythm, Token Druid players are swooping in to abuse those experimental players and decks. This is a common occurrence within new metas, as aggressive decks can be easily built and will often punish the greedier ones. Token Druid has a good ladder presence and a good matchup against both Aggro Rogue and Aggro Hunter, as you can easily swarm the board while removing their threats, leaving you with control of the board and consistent chip damage to boot. To top it all off, Druid has the option to discover armor gain, helping you lock out the more aggressive decks. As for bad matchups, Token Druid has historically struggled into some of the more control-based decks, and this meta is no exception. Its worst matchup comes from Control Priest, as this archetype has nearly endless removal and can lock out the game by sticking and buffing minions with cards like Apotheosis. Next up in Tier 2 is the fabled Miracle Rogue. Many players expected this deck to find its way to the top of the meta following the nerfs, but thanks to the hit to Penflinger, the Rogue's explosive turns have slowed down a bit. Now, it's harder to combo with Field Contact and Penflinger on a relatively empty board, as you can no longer just use Penflinger on face, making the combo much more awkward. Miracle Rogue stays true to its name, aiming to cycle aggressively using Field Contact to get to its threats and burn. This is possible thanks to cheap battle cries and combo cards, and this plan goes off relatively consistently thanks to cards like Secret Passage or Swindle. This deck boasts a pretty positive win rate against the likes of Spell Mage, as Jaina gives this deck time to find its threats and lacks sufficient removal for the Rogue's tools. Sadly, this list finds itself severely struggling against aggro decks, with Aggro Rogue being the biggest offender. This matchup is simply egregious and will require nearly optimal piloting combined with good draws to find a consistent line to win. The third deck in Tier 2 this time is Aggro Hunter. This is an archetype that sprouted up relatively early in the expansion, despite struggling against the very prominent Libram Paladin. Following the balance change, this archetype has proven to be consistent. Now it's all over the ladder. On top of this, Olgra Mancrick's wife now costs 3 mana, allowing for it to be tutored out via Barak Kodabane. Nobody tell Mancrick, he might be upset to hear that Barak knew where she was all along. Aggro Hunter works wonderfully against both Spell Mage and Aggro Rogue. Once Hunter takes the board in these matchups, the other decks typically will concede unless they drew a God Hand, as they simply can't retake the board or keep up with the burn. This Hunter build does have a hard time against some of the other aggressive decks though, with Token Druid being pretty rough, as their large and sticky boards are threatening. On top of this, playing against Control Priest can often feel like a battle that's lost before it begins. Control Priest is built to abuse poor, aggressive hunters. The last deck we'll be taking a look at in today's Meta Snapshot breakdown is Libram Paladin. This archetype was hit pretty heavily by the nerfs, as not only Sword of the Fallen, but also Penflinger were taken down a notch. These cards practically shaped the archetype into what it is today, but now, well actually, it's still a pretty strong deck. While it was hit by the nerfs, other archetypes were too, so on balance, Libram Paladin is still relatively powerful and consistent. We don't expect this deck's strength to change. In fact, it might get better after a future balance patch, but only time will tell. Libram Paladin tends to use the Secret Shell to stall out the early game, while slowly transitioning to a late game Libram package to close the match out. This Paladin deck has a great matchup against some of the more aggressive decks on ladder, such as Rogue or Hunter. Paladin players can pressure or fight for board early, but they can also heal and taunt their way out of aggression thanks to the deck's Libram cards. This deck's bad matchups aren't all that bad. They're usually closer to 50-50, but OTK Demon Hunter can be problematic if you don't draw the right early curve. While you spend your turns struggling to piece together a semblance of a board, your opponents will just cycle to their combo and kill you from a healthy life total. The standard meta is incredibly well balanced at the moment, and it feels extremely refreshing to play. While deck of Lunacy Mage is still a thing, its power level has been toned down substantially, leaving the game to feel more controllable. How are you enjoying the current Hearthstone meta? Has Forged in the Barrens brought you the same breath of fresh air that we've felt, or did you prefer the year prior to the rotation? Let us know in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed this Meta Snapshot breakdown, and as always, be sure to subscribe to our channel for our future editions, which we upload roughly every 2 weeks. We wish you the best of luck on ladder, and we look forward to seeing you next time.